Hey, this is John Gavin with Disclosure Insight, and I'm here today to introduce to you my investor education series. And this is a series I'm putting together to educate you on matters concerning the United States Securities and Exchange Commission and public markets. And really, the goal here is we always talk about achieving the returns, these great returns we want. My goal is to also help you better assess the risk so you can achieve that return. So let's get right into it then. Let's see what we have. So today, first, I want to tell you how DI, my company, helps investors. This isn't a sales pitch. This is just to give you a sense of who I am behind the microphone and running this presentation today. The first thing is we're out there regularly warning investors about undisclosed SEC investigations. We use the Freedom of Information Act to do that. That's a process I pioneered in the late 90s. I mean, going way back to when the tech bubble was going on. And so we regularly warn about undisclosed SEC investigations. If you hear it in the news that there's a research service that warned about an undisclosed SEC investigation, it's probably us. The other thing is I routinely help clients interpret disclosed SEC investigations. There are so many subtleties in the language. I'm actually going to create some videos to show you that, to show you some of the disclosure games that companies routinely play with investors. And that'll be kind of fun when we do it. There's a concept called comment letters, SEC comment letters. I'm going to go into detail on that in part 2 of this two-part presentation to talk about SEC comment letters. And then the other thing I do is I do training, I do speaking engagements and things like that. So that's the ways that we help investors. Let's get to today though. The setup for today is there are 2 SEC divisions that serious investors follow. And I know this because these people are my clients and have been for a long time. And those divisions are the Division of Enforcement and the Division of Corporation Finance. Today's presentation, again, is going to focus on enforcement. And for a little bit of shorthand here, Corporation Finance, the Division of Corporation Finance, is commonly referred to as Corp Fin. So you'll hear me refer to them as Corp Fin. But let's take a look at enforcement. All right. Enforcement, that's the people at the SEC who do the investigations. Enforcement does the investigations. CorpFin does not. CorpFin only does reviews. There's no investigations there, but CorpFin can make referrals. So something might come up with a review, within a review about a company's accounting and disclosure practices, accounting or disclosure practices, and they'll make a referral over to enforcement. Enforcement has subpoena power, CorpFin does not. Both a formal SEC investigation or an informal inquiry, those are some of the terms you'll hear. Both of them are serious. So if you know some of the financial market history over the past 20 years or so, you've heard of a company called Tyco. Executives from Tyco went to jail over what was never a formal investigation. It stayed informal, and I will explain the difference. Now, the people from Enron went to jail over what was a formal investigation. However, what's important for you to know is nearly all investigations begin informally. And the difference is informal means you're voluntarily producing records, documents, testimony. It's voluntary cooperation. Formal means that subpoenas have been issued. The government found a reason to issue subpoenas. It's often an escalation. Not always. There's some technical things when it won't be an escalation. There might be former executives of a company or a key vendor who won't cooperate without a subpoena. But generally, if a company's received a subpoena, it's usually an escalation, and it's not good. You don't want to see that. Now, one of the myths that's out there is that the SEC is investigating everyone. They are not. They're not investigating everyone. They don't go through things with a fine-tooth comb. That's just not how it works. You got to think about it that as big as the government is, they do have limited resources, so they're not investigating everyone. And the other thing is, the vast majority of SEC investigations end without an enforcement action. Now, why is that meaningful? Well, it's meaningful because every time an investigation ends, the company lets you know that it ended without an enforcement action and there was a charge of $2 from three decades ago. And the analysts cheer, Wall Street analysts cheer. Well, the fact is, my estimate is well over 95% of SEC investigations end without an enforcement action because it is really hard to prove fraud. But that doesn't mean these investigations are without consequence, and it doesn't mean you should cheer the moment you hear an investigation has ended. So the danger in my experience of reviewing these documents and investigations for well over 20 years now, the danger can be in that first year after an investigation ends. Now, that doesn't seem to make sense, but let me explain. What I put here is a picture of a cop. The cop pulls you over on the highway, right? I want you to think of your behavior. What do you do when you're driving down the highway, you know you were speeding, and the cop pulls up behind you? The cop hasn't turned on the flashers to pull you over yet, but what do you do by instinct? You pull your foot off the gas. Even when you drive past the cop, you pull your foot off the gas, right? Because the cops are watching. And so when the government shows up in an enforcement investigation, whether it's formal or informal, the cops have shown up and they're asking a bunch of questions. This is a law enforcement matter. The government has meaningful, serious powers. So when you pass the cop on the highway, you slow down. The analogy is inside the company. You know, now the auditor may be made aware. Now your board of directors is made aware. Now whatever those aggressive things you might have been doing to make sure that at the end of every quarter you hit the numbers, that might get reined in. Or maybe those bribes that you were doing overseas, you know, because it was so important for you to make the sales in those developing markets. Well, you might think twice about doing that because the cops have shown up. Now, imagine this. Now they're really in your business because they're issuing subpoenas. They're hauling your executives in. They're contacting your vendors, your customers. They're asking for all kinds of records. And this is a serious process. And so that's why I say the danger can be highest in that first year after an investigation ends, because it doesn't just go away. Now, like I said, the auditor may be alerted now. They're paying closer attention than they were before. The audit committee may be bringing greater scrutiny and people's behavior may be getting reined in. So, okay, so that's a lot so far. I want to end toward one of the most common myths that I hear and see is that public companies are required to disclose their investigations. You know, John, aren't public companies required to disclose their SEC investigations? No, they are not. They are not. Now, there's some technicalities here that are too much nuance and detail and lawyer legalese. I'm not an attorney to cover in this video. But what I will say this is I have audit firms and insurance carriers that rely on DI research, the research my company produces, because their own public company clients don't always tell them about their investigations. Now, you would think surely they would tell them, but they don't, because here's the deal. And this is my guidance going forward on this. If an SEC probe is disclosed, anytime one is disclosed, no matter the soothing, comforting words that come out with it, no matter the analyst going on CNBC, the analysts who don't know squat about this area, but suddenly they're SEC experts, and they're going to assure you that all is well, don't believe them. What I want you to focus on is if an SEC probe is disclosed, assume management thinks it represents a material exposure. It's material. You have a material risk now in your holding, no matter what the topic is. Even if they just say, we received a subpoena and we're cooperating fully, and they tell you nothing further, assume it's a material risk, and your job to assess that risk so you can achieve the return is to figure out what's going on and why that management judged that so material that they felt they had to disclose it. All right, so today we covered I introduced you that there's two divisions that serious investors follow. We talked about enforcement today. We will get to CorpFin in part 2. Listen, thanks for joining me. I look forward to seeing you on the next video.